Bhakti Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yutapatakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajata Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangum Langayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Tatsat Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagwan Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Today we are going to discuss about the life of Narada Muni. It's Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 6. In the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Vyasadeva was despondent after having compiled all the different Puranas and the Vedas, not knowing the reason for the cause of his despondency, Narada Muni appeared in his ashrama in a place known as Badrika Ashrama. And Narada Muni points two faults at Vyasadeva's works. One is there is insufficient direct glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. And second is overemphasis on the four Purusharthas, which is Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. And Narada Muni advises Vyasadeva, because of this overemphasis, it will mislead the people who are already distracted, making them feel that it's all right to go for material pursuits and eventually they can come to spirituality, which has a big inherent risk, and that is one may get stuck in a certain level. One may think, let me first earn enough money, then I can enjoy, then I can give up and try for moksha. But then how much is too much? One may never feel that they have earned enough to start enjoying and to start letting go and to take the next step forward. And we can see even in modern days, almost everyone who is without the knowledge of Bhakti Yoga, without the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, they go through that same emotions, which is they think, let me earn a bit more, let me spend a bit more. And when I become old, I can practice spirituality. But then how much is too much and how old is being old enough to start letting go of things and focus on the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It's very difficult. So Narada Muni, knowing very well about the tendency of people in Kali Yuga, he mentions about these 2 points, and in order to emphasize or re-emphasize rather the importance of bhakti, he starts to narrate his own life history. Narada Muni was born, in his previous life he was born as a child of a maid servant who had the opportunity to serve the Bhaktivedantas during the 4 months of Chaturmasya. We are in the last month of Chaturmasya, Damodar Mas. So during the rainy season, the sages or wandering mendicants, they don't travel for practical reasons. And they also take this as an opportunity to stay in one place and distribute Krishna Bhakti in more detail with more personal attention to people in that area wherever they stay. So these Bhaktivedantas, when they arrived at the proximity of Narada Muni, he took that opportunity to serve them, still being a 5-year-old boy. And then, with their permission, he takes the remnants of their prasadam. And before they departed, they gave him mantra diksha. Narada Muni also mentions about the mantra to Vyasadeva as well, asking him to join him in the chanting of the glories of the holy name. And Narada Muni, after giving a brief synopsis of his previous life, he concludes, he speaks many, many beautiful verses. We saw, idam hi pumsas tapasas shrutasya va shvistasya shuktasya cha buddhi dattayaho avichuto artha kavibir nirupito yad uttama shloka gunanuvarnanam. The ultimate purpose of idam hi pumsas tapasas shrutasya va. Learned circles have accepted that the ultimate purpose of any activities that we do, including tapasa, austerity, shrutasya, which is the study of the Vedic scriptures, svishtasya, sacrifice, shuktasya, cultivating knowledge, cha buddhi, using one's intelligence, dattayaho, charity, whatever that we do. Datta means to give, charity. So the ultimate purpose of all of this, avichito artha kavibir nirupito. Kavibir means the great transcendentalists have accepted that the ultimate purpose of all these 6 activities is uttama shloka gunanuvarnanam, is glorification of the Supreme Personalities, name, fame, qualities, pastimes. Uttama shloka guna anu varnanam. To glorify. Varnanam means to the glorification or the description of all the glories of the Supreme Lord. So Narada Muni narrates his background, establishing about the supremacy of bhakti, and he also gave a very simple definition about how any activity that we do can be engaged in the service of the Lord and can be called bhakti yoga. Whatever activities that we do, if we simply engage that in the service of the Lord, then that becomes bhakti yoga. So he again concludes saying, therefore, bhakti yoga should be given its due importance, and he encourages Vyasadeva to glorify it fully. And the reasons he say only Vyasadeva can do is because Vyasadeva himself is very pure at heart. And secondly, Vyasadeva is a plenary portion of the Supreme Lord himself. Who is better suited to glorify the Supreme Lord than he himself? So, in this way, he presents logical statements convincing Vyasadeva that he should embark on creating a work that would aim at glorifying the process of bhakti and ultimately glorify the uncommon pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is how the 5th chapter of the 1st canto finished. When Vyasadeva hears about the history of Narada Muni, he gets curious. Normally, when a disciple hears something about the spiritual master from his own lotus lips, about his or her own early life, they would be very curious to know more. So Vyasadeva, he puts forth a series of questions. His questions are, after Narada Muni had heard from the Bhaktivedantas, took their association, took their remnants, and also got initiated by them, his first question is, what did he do afterwards? They have come, given him mercy, and they have gone. So now what did Narada Muni do? Narada boy, Prabhupada writes, how did you pass your life after initiation? What did you do after they have left? How did you pass your life after initiation? And you were just that 5-year-old boy born of a maidservant. How did you attain this present transcendental body? Narada Muni has got spiritual body, and With the same body, he can travel anywhere, both in spiritual world as well as in material world. So Vyasadeva was curious, how did you get this spiritual body? And finally, he asks a very interesting question. He says, how did you remember your past life? Because normally when we die, we don't remember anything from the past life. So Vyasadeva, when he hears from Narada Muni about his own past life, Vyasadeva gets curious that his birth in the present body has to be something special. So he puts forth that question, asking him, what did you do afterward? How did you pass your life after initiation? How did you get this body? And finally, how are you able to remember your past life? And in response to these questions, Narada Muni again goes back to his history and he gives more detail about what had transpired after the Bhaktivedantas, or the pure devotees of the Lord, departed from his place. Shortly after they departed, his mother, who Narada Muni is dependent on, and she is also a single mother, she didn't have anyone else. Even though she herself was in a helpless situation, because as a maidservant, there is only so much she can actually do to take care of her little boy. So in that situation, one day she goes to milk a cow. And at that time, she got bitten by a serpent and she dies. Already Narada Muni had only one personality who he is totally dependent on. And now she also died. If we put ourselves in that situation, we can understand how precarious the situation is. Brought up by a single mother, and that mother also died. And he is still a 5-year-old boy. He has no one in this world, no means of livelihood, no food, nothing he knows. However, the association of the Bhaktivedantas and the transcendental knowledge that they had imparted on him came into play. Immediately, Narada Muni accepted this is being arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Narada Muni, without spending much time, immediately he leaves. And he starts to travel everywhere. Starts to travel in the mountains, countryside, cities, towns, forest, deep within the forest, where even dangerous creatures, as even poisonous serpents, they crawl. Going through everywhere, Prabhupada makes a very beautiful point in the purport in this verse, where Prabhupada says to dig the earth and to try to get some valuable materials out is not the invention of a modern man. It was available even during Narada Muni's time. And Prabhupada says that they take it out, they build something, and then in due course of the time, Mother Nature takes away everything. And then again the next cycle starts, it just keeps on going. So Prabhupada says that this activities in material world is actually a repeat movie, going in infinite loop. And there is nothing exciting about it, which means Prabhupada's point here is, whatever we are very curious to know, to read about what's happening everywhere in this world, is a knowledge which we have come across in the past as well, so many times. So what we see as news is not news actually. These are all our acquaintances from so many millions of births, because the way how this material creation and the maintenance is orchestrated is like a repeat movie. Whatever that happened in the past, the detail may vary slightly, but the principles, the underlying traits, they remain the same. So Prabhupada says, understanding or trying to read, and Prabhupada specifically mentions about archaeologists who try to dig deep try to study the fossils and try to actually understand. The Prabhupada says there is nothing exciting, because whatever you see now will become fossil in future, and whatever you are seeing in the past is also no different to what we did. Like we dig, what kind of things will we come across? We have got the vessels of, some people who have lived 10,000 years ago. How different is that to the vessel that we have now? Or we found a weapon that was used 5,000 years ago. We may be able to find something digging the earth. Prabhupada says this is wasting the valuable human form of life, because nothing is new. Whatever that was there, it's there even now. And whatever that we take it for granted, 10,000 years from now, archaeologists will actually dig deep and they will feel excited about it. But Prabhupada says these are all waste of time, because all of this mining, all of this modern technology was available even in the past times. So one should not waste one's life in studying something which is going as a repeat movie, because it's not very exciting. This is one instruction which Narada Muni also had given to Vyasadeva, that one should not be so much worried about learning or obtaining things which will anyway come to one. Rather, one should focus on studying something which is very rare. So here Prabhupada makes that point that one should not waste one's life to simply go through the same things over and over again. Instead, one should focus on obtaining the rarest achievement in human form of life. Tasaiva heta prayate takovida na labhyate yad brahmatam uparyada tal labhyate dukkavad anyata sukam kalena sarvatra gabira ramhasa. So Narada Muni had given this instruction to Vyasadeva already, that even in the scriptures, you don't write about 4 purusharthas, because dharma, artha, kama, moksha will end. Dharma, artha, especially to develop one's material prosperity, one doesn't need to endeavor so much, because based on one's karma, whatever that is destined for them will anyway come to them. Just like how dukkha comes, sukha also will come. We often tend to focus only on the miseries which we face in material world, but just like how the miseries come to us uninvited, happiness also will come to us uninvited. Just like how you can't hold on to the happiness longer than its due time, you can't hold on to your sadness also longer than its due time. We simply can't. So even if we think about the most painful situation, after 1 day, 2 days, even if you try to recollect, you will forget. Time will take away everything. Time will take away our possessions, it will take away our happiness, it will take away our sadness as well. So we don't need to focus so much on it. Rather, our endeavor and efforts should be aimed at achieving something which is not easily achieved, which is achievable only in human form of life, which will give us a ticket to go back to the spiritual world. So Narada Muni goes across all of this different places, and he comes, Narada Muni, as a Parivrajaka, even as a 5-year-old boy, he travels everywhere, and finally he comes to a place where there is a beautiful forest. He is feeling very exhausted, so he drinks water from a stream, sits under a banyan tree, and then he starts to meditate, because he already has the knowledge from the Bhaktivedantas about how to meditate and how to pursue spirituality. So he sits in one place, feeling rejuvenated after refreshing himself with the stream of water. He sits under a banyan tree and he starts to meditate. Dhyayatas charanambojam bhava nirjita chetasha. So dhyayatas charana ambojam. So he sits in one place, he starts to meditate on the charana ambojam, on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Bhava nirjita chetasha. Simply by meditating on the Supreme Lord, he immediately could perceive meditating on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, his heart got transformed with love. And what's the symptom of that? Aukantashru kalakshasya. Tears start to roll down from his eyes. Dhyayatas charanambojam bhava nirjita chetasa. His heart got transformed into love, and then that gets expressed by tears rolling down his cheeks. When Narada Muni is wrapped in meditation of the Supreme Personality's lotus feet, Riddhashin me shanai harihi. At that time, the Supreme Lord appeared within his heart. So this is the description Narada Muni himself narrates. Dhyayatas charanam bojam bhava nirjita chetasha aukantashru kalakshasya Riddhashin me shanai harihi. Lord came in the lotus feet. He became situated in the heart of Narada Muni. How soon? Very soon. Shanai means quickly. Riddhashin me shanai harihi. He almost immediately came. The quality of Narada's meditation was like that. The quality of Narada's devotional service was such that simply by sitting in one place and meditating, focusing on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord got attracted by his simple bhakti. Riddhashin me shanai harihi. Riddha means heart. He comes and he appears to Narada Muni. When the Supreme Lord appears in the heart of Narada Muni, Narada boy, he felt each one of his limbs, each one of his senses got enlivened. Each one of them. The eyes, they felt the maximum satisfaction. The hands, the ears, nose, sense of smell, sense of taste. Each one of his senses, they felt rejuvenated. It's inconceivable for us. How could it be? How will it feel? Normally on summer days, on a hot summer, people would usually go traveling to a hilly region. For what? Simply to get some pleasure for the sense of touch. That's all. Because sense of touch gets most affected in summer. Same way winter as well. We tend to go to warm places. If you look at the effort that goes in that, the cost of flight ticket, spending thousands of dollars, the cost it actually takes to hire a place, the compromise that one has to make in terms of even food during travel, one may not get everything. All those endeavor, the amount of time one had spent doing one's work to earn that money, the amount of thought process that goes, using one's intelligence, where to go, how to go, making all the plan, time, money, effort, all for a tiny pleasure for the skin, just for a limited period of time. But that's the price one pays. The reason why scriptures time and again they condemn materialistic pursuits is, what we don't realize is, we think we had some money and I'm buying something. What's the big deal? But what material energy won't allow us to realize is the time or the actual absolute cost that comes for enjoying this little pleasure, which is time. Nalabhya swarnakotipihi nache nirarthakam niti kachahanis tatodika. Ayusa kshana ekopi. This is Chanakya Pandit's instruction. Prabhupada would often quote, Ayusa kshana ekopi nalabhya swarnakotipihi nache nirarthakam niti kachahanis tatodika. He says, Ayusa kshana. Ayusa means in one's life. Kshana means just a moment. Ekopi, which means even one moment of life. Na labhya means one cannot gain even one moment of life. Na labhya swarnakotipihi. One cannot earn one moment of life, even in exchange for Swarna Koti Pihi, means for 1 crore gold coins. 10 million gold coins also cannot buy one moment that one has lost. Nacha nirarthakam niti kacha hanis tatodika. This being the case, what could be the greatest loss for human than the time that he or she wastes in one's life? Very logically he presents. So time is the greatest commodity we have. Time is the greatest resource that we have in our life. So materialistic pursuit, what it does is, it doesn't make us realize that we are actually losing time. We are losing time in the prime of our youth. We will have a lot of time when we are old, but you cannot do much with that. Because the faculty that is actually needed to use the time will become weak by then. Our mind will become weak, intelligence will become weak, senses, our energy level will become weak. We can barely maintain our body because body is in dwindling stage. So to go for spiritual pursuit at that point of time is extremely difficult. Especially if one is not trained in Krishna consciousness in early age. It becomes very difficult to start anything. What to speak of taking up the most important duty of human form of life. And one should not risk, because one may die at an young age also. Nobody knows when a person would die. When Yudhishthir Maharaj was asked this question about what is the most wonderful thing you have seen in this world, he says, there are many wonderful things, but the most wonderful thing I have found in this world is Ahani ahani bhutani gachantiha yamalayam sesha stavaram ichanti kim ascharya matapara. He says, everyone in this world sees people dying all around, but they think they will not die. All of us, we feel like that. He says, this is the most wonderful thing. Now, Yudhishthira Maharaj is Dharmaraj, one who is the master of Dharma. And if he says this, it got to be true. He says, this is the most wonderful thing. Ahani ahani bhutani gachantiha yamalayam, which means one is dying and one is going to the abode of Yamaraj. Everyone is seeing people dying all around. Every single day you open newspaper or you look at any news website, you will always see somebody dying. But somehow everyone feels, I won't die. He says, Kim Ascharya Matapara, what could be more wonderful than this? When we are actually seeing everything happening, still we are not taking death seriously. Still we are somehow thinking, holding on to the hope that I won't die. Others may die, but I won't. So this is why this material energy is known as Maya. It will influence us to think in a certain way. It will never allow us to learn from our mistakes. That's why experience is not the best teacher. Mind will still throw another spin saying, you failed in that attempt because of a certain reason, change the approach and you can do it. And then in this way, people go making one futile attempt after another for the whole life, and then finally one is at loss because one has nalabhya swarna kotipihi. One has lost something which is more valuable than millions of gold coins, which is one shana, one moment, what to speak of one's life. So it's very important that we clearly define the goal of our life, clearly define what constitutes a win in our life. There's no point in studying. I remember in my childhood days, I would sometimes look at my brother's books because you find always interesting stuff in my school days. And then my aunt would actually scold me, saying, why are you reading that? That's not in your syllabus. You need to focus on your exams. Similarly, we need to clearly define what our syllabus is. And the syllabus here is what should I actually do to gain a ticket back to spiritual world, which is doing devotional service now, bhakti now. If outside of bhakti we study or we do other things, they don't constitute anything. They don't count towards our success in life at all. It's totally out of syllabus. It may look interesting. It will help us kill time. So we may not feel bored. But what it does is, it makes us go astray from our real goal in life, which is to go back to spiritual world, which is to re-establish our lost connection with the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, what is awaiting, what will await for us in the next life is, again, yet another life, yet another cycle of birth, death, old age and disease. So here, Narada Muni, he got trained in bhakti by these Bhaktivedantas. He sits in one place, he meditates on the lotus feet of the Lord. Dhyayatas charanam bhojam bhava nirjita chetasa aukantashru kalakshasya hridda shinme shanai harihi. Supreme Lord comes, stands in the core of his heart immediately, and he feels all his senses feeling rejuvenated. He could feel the pleasure. And when he had that first-hand experience, as we said, the materialistic pursuits which people do, I gave example of the pleasure which one gets just for the skin. Likewise, we can analyze for everything. So much effort goes in satisfying the tongue. So much effort goes in satisfying music. Millions and billions of dollars are actually spent for hearing some materialistic music. Millions and billions of dollars are spent for giving some materialistic pleasure for our eyes in the form of, could be movies, some music videos, so on and so forth. So eventually, if we analyze it carefully with Shastra Chakshu, through the eyes of the Shastras, we can understand every so-called pleasure that we have in the material world is simply to satisfy these five senses. Flavor will change, packaging will change, but the principle is to satisfy each of the senses. Now that satisfaction of the senses, Narada Muni gets as soon as he sees the Supreme Lord in his heart. Isn't this a more smart way? Isn't this the more effective way? Isn't this the more meaningful way? Because unlike materialistic pleasure, even if one keeps on seeing a movie, one movie, okay, two, after that what happens? Eye starts to get dry. One starts to get headache. So the same source of pleasure, yehi sam sparsha jaboga dukkha yone evate. Same source of pleasure will become source of pain. On the other hand, we'll see what happened to Narada Muni as soon as he loses, because he sits in meditation, he sees the Supreme Lord, meditating on the Supreme Lord, tears starts to roll down, Lord appears within his heart, all the senses gets rejuvenated, he feels bliss, and then suddenly the Lord vanishes. But unlike the experience we face in material world, wherein we get onto the flight, for example, Prabhupada says, before getting onto the flight, everyone has that excitement. Yes, I'm going to fly. But Prabhupada says 1 hour into the flight, people start to wonder, when is the flight going to land? Because there is so much inconvenience. You can't move this side or that side. If you have to go to toilet, there is always a long queue. You'll start to feel hungry, bored. You can watch a movie, 1 or 2. After that, what could you do? And there is always this loud noise of the engine. So much. And if there is, if the flight actually comes across some pockets in the cloud, then it goes through turbulence. You have the sign, everyone seat belt on, sit in one place. So many inconveniences there. But next time when the flight experience happens, again we get very excited. Wow, I'm going to go in flight. But then as soon as you go 1 hour into it, again it becomes a painful experience. Likewise, Prabhupada gives another example. One can feel, wow, I have a lot of facility now, I can eat so much. Prabhupada says, you take one chapati more than what you are capable of handling, you will get diarrhea instantly. Nature will slap you straight away. So we have independence, but the independence is very limited. The independence is actually very measured, and we don't have much leeway. We can't afford to have a bigger margin of error. Very, 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 very tiny. Little bit you go, we get slapped straight away. So here Narada Muni sees the Supreme Lord vanishes. Now Narada Muni immediately, he becomes desperate to see, because he has lost a most valuable thing. Initially he was in pursuit, he wandered everywhere, sat in meditation, and now he has seen the Lord. Now he is craving for the presence of the Supreme Lord again, because he had gotten an experience. Narada Muni, after attempting to bring the Lord again to within his heart, in desperation, he opens his eyes, gets up. When we lose, that's how we react. That's how desperate he was to get the association of the Supreme Lord. Sits in one place, again tries to meditate, again tries to see the Supreme Lord. This time he couldn't see. Instead, he heard the voice of the Supreme Lord, who tells him, "Oh my dear Narada, the form that you have seen, you will not see again. I have shown this to you to increase your desire to be with me." And the Supreme Lord says, why does he not showing himself to Narada Muni again? He gives two reasons. He tells to Narada Muni, I won't show my darshan to you, because first thing he says is, you are incomplete in your service. You have just started. And second, he says, I won't show myself to anyone who has even the slightest taint of material desire. So because of these two reasons, your service is incomplete, and you are not free from material taints. Now we should not mistake, Narada Muni has got still material desires. Narada Muni was already free from material desires. But the Supreme Lord tells that to Narada Muni to make him become more humble. We should not mistake the position of Narada Muni, but the Lord is telling this to Narada Muni to make him more humble, saying, you are incomplete in your service, and I'm not going to show you to increase your desire. And he says, I don't show myself to anyone who has even a little bit of material taint in them, or who is not fully free from material taints, material qualities. And then the Supreme Lord himself says the glories of devotional service. It's important we can understand this pastime at multiple levels, from different angles. From Vyasadev's perspective, he is asking Narada Muni to narrate so he can feel inspired. From Narada Muni's perspective, he gives instructions to Vyasadev, and simply to drive home the point about the glories of bhakti, he is using his own history to inspire Vyasadeva. But in that history, he is talking about his experience. This is very, very important, because many times people take up bhakti, they chant Hare Krishna, they may come to temple, they actually go to satsanga, but you may not find the people inspired. Why? Because the experience is missing. Raja Vidya, Raja Guyam, Pavitram idam uttamam, Pratyaksha vagamam dharmyam, Sushukam kartam avyayam. Pratyaksha vagamam dharmyam. Pratyaksha is important. Pratyaksha means one's own direct experience. Now, unless one gets one's own direct experience, it's very hard to stay inspired on this path of bhakti. There is only so much we can borrow from others. Srila Prabhupada says, at the end of the day, all of us need to fly our own plane. We can take the lessons from others. We may have co-pilot guiding us during training sessions. But there will come a time when we'll be on our own and we have to fly our own plane. In other words, there is only so much association with others can do. It can inspire us. It can trigger the eagerness within our heart. It can give us a lot of enthusiasm to practice bhakti. So these are all different tools and ammunitions which we can get. But the question is, what are we going to do with all this ammunition which we collect from others? How are we going to use that to enhance our bhakti? So using all these different tools of sadhu sangha, lessons from shastra, the prasadam, mercy, everything we actually get, we have to take that and somehow use all those ammunitions we collect to experience bhakti. We have to use that to experience bhakti. How can we experience? There is only one way how we can experience the glories of bhakti, as what Narada Muni does here. And that is by putting all the knowledge, theoretical knowledge, into practice. Practice means by doing devotional service. Unless we do devotional service, we won't get realization. And unless you do devotional service and experience that realization, we cannot sustain in our bhakti. This is the deal breaker. Or positively, this is the game changer. What separates a mediocre, a neophyte devotee from an advanced devotee is a mediocre or a neophyte devotee will take theoretical knowledge and they would be simply focused on how can I gain more pleasure. Now, Prabhupada says, by nature, anandamaya abhyasat, the soul is pleasure seeking always, but it is seeking the pleasure in a different place, in the wrong place. It is seeking it in movie theaters, it is seeking it in bars, it is seeking it in brothels, it is seeking it in material pursuits. But Prabhupada says, soul will still be dissatisfied. Where can it find ultimate pleasure? That it can find only in the service of the Lord. So unless the soul is reinstated in the position to experience that pleasure which is so accustomed to, we'll always feel restless. If a person thinks, okay, so today I will go and go to a bar to seek some pleasure. Body will go, mind will go, soul, because it is inside, soul will also accompany. And the person goes, drinks. But the soul is still dissatisfied because soul still hadn't gotten the food, soul still hadn't gotten the pleasure which it is seeking. So it will not feel blissful, and because of that, the person would have just wasted the time, wasted money, wasted one's health, and then come back as a sore loser. The next day, a person may think like, no, yesterday I went to the bar, no, today I'll go seek pleasure watching a movie. They may go to a movie theater. Same repeat thing again happens. The trailer of the movie will always be very much hyped because they would pick the best scenes of the movie, best music track of the movie, and they'll package it, hyping it up so much. So a non-suspicious or an unsuspicious viewer would actually go expecting a certain level of standard in the movie. Again, material energy will convince the viewer that if 30-second trailer can be so scintillating, how much more scintillating, blissful, entertaining the 3-hour long movie will be. And they would go, time and again they'll get let down. Watch it, halfway through, they would think, okay, when is the movie going to end? By the time the movie finishes, they would be wondering, walking out, why did I actually waste my time, money, half a day of holiday gone, everything gone. But in each of these different scenarios, the situation changes, nature of pleasure changes, but the underlying principle of seeking for pleasure still remains the same. Same position if a person comes to a temple to see Radha Gopinath. They take darshan of the Lord. They hear kirtans. They take prasad. They may make some donation. They may purchase a book. They may talk to some other devotee. When they walk out, nobody will actually think, oh, I wasted 2 hours of my time going to temple. Nobody. Why? Because those 2 hours, even in the whole long weekend, someone had wasted the whole long weekend. After the end of that long weekend, if one looks back, the only consolation which they would have is, I've wasted the whole long weekend, at least I've spent 2 hours of my life usefully. Experiential exercise. Why does one not regret visiting temple, any temple for that matter? Because that is the only place where soul is satisfied. One may be going and attending a class of Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, or one may be giving a class. One may be doing service the same way. One may go to the temple, do some service, or one may do some service in the community. Any preaching program or kirtan program, anything. That same joy which one feels being in the temple, one will feel the same amount of joy here, because the service is also connected to the pleasure of Radha Gopinath. Same understanding, if you stretch it, if you are staying in your home, you do every activity connected to Krishna, you will feel happy. The underlying principle in all of this is, the soul will feel satisfied because it will experience bliss only when the activity that we do with this body and mind is connected to Krishna, either directly or indirectly. Without that experience, it's practically impossible to stay enthused in Krishna Bhakti. This is the game changer. This is what separates a mediocre neophyte devotee from an advanced devotee. The more one gets advanced in Krishna consciousness, more one gets advanced in Bhakti Yogi, more one will be committed to doing devotional service, because they have got first-hand experience and they are convinced beyond doubt that the pleasure which I seek, which I have been seeking since the time I was born, at least as far as this life is concerned, that pleasure gets satisfied, in fact, multiplied much more than our expectation, only when we do some devotional service for the Lord. And that experience Narada Muni had simply by sitting in meditation, chanting the Lord's name, wandering everywhere and following the instructions of his preceptors or spiritual teachers, which are the Bhaktivedanta devotees. So in this way, Narada Muni is speaking from his own experience. And that experience one gets only when one does some seva, whatever services. But one has to do devotional service. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he translates bhakti not as devotion, not as sentiment, not as an emotion. He translates bhakti as devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada, as the true disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, held on to that definition everywhere. Whenever Prabhupada wanted to say bhakti, he says devotional service, not just devotion, because generally the understanding of the word devotion means some passive, some soft, sentimental emotion towards God, which is great. But how are we? That's just an ammunition. Now, how are we going to put that tool or ammunition or fuel into use? That emotion has to be expressed in a certain way. Just like you may have the birthday of somebody who is very close to you. You can feel, wow, that's my best friend or that's my soulmate. I feel so happy that today is the birthday of such and such person. Fine, but how will that person know? You have to put that emotion into practice, and that can be in the form of a simple word. You can go and wish them. You can send a greeting card. You can buy a gift. You can host a party. You can even send an SMS text. But that emotion has its value only based on its expression. Krishna is also a person. And here we are trying to love Krishna. And we have a certain emotion. How are we going to express this emotion? Introducing devotional service. Unless we do devotional service, we can't experience bhakti. And unless we experience the pleasure that comes in bhakti, we can't remain as devotees. So it's not by doing service, Krishna is benefited. By doing service, first person who will be benefited is us. And you will see it later in this chapter. In fact, when the conclusion of this chapter comes, Shukadeva Goswami himself mentions about that. And he says, Narada Muni goes around singing for multiple purposes. And he would say one of the purposes for his own pleasure, which is true. When you do Kirtana, Lord is happy. Because Lord is happy, all the devotees are happy. Because the Lord and devotees are happy, we will also be happy. So we gain pleasure by giving pleasure to Krishna. Now this is a very revolutionary concept, because from the materialistic upbringing which we all had, we are always taught, if you want pleasure, you go and seek it. You go and snatch it. If I feel hungry, I have to bring a plate and I have to put the food in my mouth. That's how I'm going to feel my hunger quenched. If I feel thirsty, I have to pick up a glass of water and I have to drink. If I feel cold, I have to pick up a blanket or I have to pick up a shawl, cover my body to keep it warm. Now, because this is the upbringing we are all in, this whole idea about giving pleasure to someone and then in turn receiving pleasure by that, it's a revolutionary idea. In fact, it is one point which our mind will be challenged time and again if we don't get this one point clear. So, we have to take instructions from the scriptures. We have tried everything. I was recently giving a class, I was telling the youth, you have tried everything. Paragliding, deep diving, singing, dancing, snorkeling, bungee diving, bungee jumping. Why not chanting? We have done so many things. Just add this one thing. Try it out. What's the loss? So, unless we take it up, unless we take that little thing, whatever instructions that we read in the scriptures, and put into practice, we cannot experience. Unless we experience, we cannot be convinced about this path and sustain the enthusiasm and momentum in practicing Bhakti Yoga. Narada Muni or Narada boy became Narada Muni because he put that knowledge which the sages have said into practice. How did he put into practice? He started traveling. He understood this is hand of Krishna. His only source of support, his only source of shelter is gone. He's taken away. He took it as arrangement of Krishna. He started traveling everywhere. He just didn't wander doing nothing. He traveled everywhere singing about the Lord, whatever that we heard. He sat in meditation. He is putting into practice. But then Narada Muni won't be satisfied just doing this. He will expand the glories of the Lord. He will preach left, right and center to every person who he comes across. And this way, he had an experience initially, but then eventually he expands on the glories of the Supreme Lord. He expands that experience by giving Krishna Bhakti to others. Narada, one who gives the Supreme Lord to others, Narayana to others. So here, after the Supreme Lord appears, he tells him, you cannot see me again because you are incomplete and you are not fully free from material taints. And then the Supreme Lord himself starts to glorify about the power of devotional service. Satsevya dirgyapi jata mai dridamati hitva avadyam imam lokam ganta majjanatamasi. The Lord tells to Narada Muni, Sat Sevaya Adirgayapi. Sat Sevaya means service of the Absolute Truth, service to the Lord's devotees. Adirgayapi means even if it is done for a few days. Narada Muni didn't do that for long. It's just during Chaturmasya month. And as a boy, how much service he could have done anyway? Little. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. So Supreme Lord is telling him, you are in this position because you have served my devotees. Even though you have served for a few days, he says the effect of that is unlimited. Sat sevaya dirgyapi. When you do services to the Lord, devotional service to the Lord, devotional service to the devotees, it brings a lot of benefits. And here in this verse, the Lord says, Satsevaya dirgyapi jata mai dridamati. First effect you get is, you get unflinching devotion. Drida means fixed. Mati, intelligence. Your intelligence won't waver. You will remain fixed in bhakti simply by doing devotional service. Serving the devotees and serving the Supreme Lord. Satsevaya dirgyapi jata mai dridamati. Now with that fixed devotion which the Supreme Lord is actually giving, being pleased with our devotional service, what one ultimately achieves, he says, Hitva avadyam ivam lokam. He says, Hitva means to give up, avadyam. In Tamil, we use the word avadi. Avadi means painful situation. Hitva avadyam imam lokam. Krishna says, when you serve my pure devotees, because of that I give you unflinching devotion, jata mai dridamati. With that unflinching devotion to me, hitva, you can give up this material world. Hitva avadyam imam lokam. You give up this deplorable. Deplorable means hate-worthy. You can hate it. I hate this material world. Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur, he says, Prabhupada would often quote him, he says that this world is no place for gentlemen and ladies, both. But his quote is, this world is no place for gentlemen, meaning anyone with a proper sane mind wouldn't make plan to stay in this material world. And Krishna is saying here also. Elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita also we saw that Krishna says about this material world, Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. Mam apetya punarjanma Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. Krishna says. Dukkha alayam. Alayam means like a place, abode. Dukkha alayam means, dukkha means pain, misery. The abode of miseries. That's material world. So here also Krishna is saying, Hitva avadyam imam lokam. One gives up, Hitva gives up, avadyam, deplorable. Imam lokam, this material world. After giving up what one does, Ganta majjanatamasi, he says, then one goes back to the spiritual world to associate with me and my devotees. Majjanatam, Krishna is saying, my associates. You will become the associate of my associates. So in this way, Supreme Lord glorifies the power of devotional service. We'll stop here and continue next week the rest of this chapter. After hearing these instructions, what did Narada Muni do? And how did he eventually got to be born as the son of Lord Brahma in his next life? Any questions? How does one search for a pure devotee? And how does one maximize their experience with the pure devotee? Good question. There are many ways how we can answer this. Prabhupada says, once in one university, when Prabhupada was giving, one student asks Prabhupada, have you seen God? Prabhupada asks him, if I tell you I have, will you believe? Then the student says, yes. Then Prabhupada says, I have. And I can also show you. Normally, people ask, can I see God? Prabhupada says that, do we have even knowledge to actually understand who's a pure devotee, who's God, and who's a bogus guru? Unless you have knowledge about what a spiritual master is supposed to be, how to identify a spiritual master, how can you be confident that the person you are choosing is actually qualified? The point I'm trying to make here is, we need to have a certain knowledge. We need to have certain understanding about spirituality in order to even decide on, okay, this is a proper person and this is not so proper person. This person is sticking to the scriptures and this person isn't. So how do we understand who is a pure devotee? First of all, we need to have a certain basic understanding at least. And where do we get the basic understanding from? Scriptures only. Shastras teaches about how to identify a pure devotee. They'll be free from envy. They'll be the well-wishers of everyone. They'll be very humble. They'll be free from pride. Prabhupada gives the most terse definition about pure devotees. Prabhupada says how to identify who is the best guru or who is a guru, one who is most addicted to Krishna. And then the reporter asks, Swamiji, how to understand who is a bad guru? Prabhupada says guru means good guru. There is no such term as bad guru. It's a rascal, like that. So guru means one who is most addicted to Krishna. Once one disciple of Srila Prabhupada goes to Gaur Govinda Maharaj. This is after the departure of Srila Prabhupada. And he goes to Gaur Govinda Maharaj and he asks him. They both are God brothers. So he asks him, Maharaj, I'm thinking about taking sannyas. What is the basic qualification to take sannyas? Then Maharaj says, when you chant Hare Krishna, the only thought that should come to your mind is Radha and Krishna. And then this Prabhupada's disciple tells him, no Maharaj, I'm just asking for the bare minimum qualification. Then Maharaj tells him, this is the bare minimum qualification to take sannyas, which is when we chant Hare Krishna, only thought we should get, if at all, should be of Radha and Krishna. So, pure devotees means, Prabhupada says, one who's following the Shastras, one who repeats the previous Acharyas, one whose Achar and Prachar is proper. Achar means one's own personal behavior, Prachar means what he or she preaches to others. Titikshava Karunika, Shuhridam Sarvadehinam, Ajata Shatrava Shanta, Sadhava Sadhu Bhushana. One who is very tolerant, one who is very merciful, one who is the well-wisher of everyone. Ajata Shatrava Shanta, one who is non-envious, one who is very peaceful, one who is a sadhu. So these are the sadhu bhushana, these are the decorations, these are the qualities with which you identify who is a pure devotee. And how does one maximize their experience with pure devotee? Prabhupada would often say, Vani and Bapu. You maximize the association by hearing. 2 weeks ago, I attended Radhika Das Prabhu's Kirtan in Maricoll in Sydney. Then I started hearing his Kirtans regularly. Now, every time I actually hear, I'm remembering that experience, being there with the other devotees, dancing, getting at least a momentary association with them personally. So we can carry that always. How do we maximize? We stay connected by sound vibration. Shrotapanta, that's the path. So the connection is through Shruti, Shrota, by hearing. And when in person, we take on top of hearing, we go and take some Vapu Sangha. Again, Sangha means association. Many times we understand because of the material baggage we carry. Sangha means just physically sitting next to some pure devotee and doing nothing. That's what we think. Sangha means to serve. Association means to serve. And association means to be there and physically serve. That can be in the form of hearing, being in the physical presence of a spiritual master, physical presence of a pure devotee and hearing from them, doing some practical service for them, cooking for them, cleaning for them, playing musical instruments for them, singing along with them, attentively hearing what they have to say. Everything is service. Practically, whatever that we can actually do, that's how we maximize the association. We have to rid of many inherent misconceptions we all have, like bhakti Because of reading Prabhupada's books, we have all got some decent understanding. Yes, bhakti means I have to do some service. But still, when laziness creeps in, we tend to go with the passive, idle, meditative bhakti. That's not bhakti. Bhakti means action, cultivation. There has to be service. Anyabhilashita shunyam, jnana karmadi anavritam, anukulyena krishna anushilanam. 3 positive qualities. It has to be favorable for Krishna, anukul. It has to be for Krishna, anushilanam. There has to be a practical cultivation of bhakti, practical expression of bhakti, which is through devotional service. So both are important. Was Narada liberated as a child from all purusharthas except moksha? Narada was liberated from everything, including moksha. Narada was on Prema platform, even as a boy. There are scenarios where Krishna puts his devotees through simply to teach the whole world, just like how Krishna put all the Pandavas through. Krishna put the Vrishnis through, Brajabasis through. Parikshit Maharaj, he goes for hunting. Parikshit Maharaj had seen Krishna. We'll discuss about him later in the first chapter, or rather first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He had seen Krishna. Whole life he dedicated simply to examining, is this Krishna? Is this Krishna? That's why how he gets the name Parikshit, one who examines. Pariksha, examines. But what is he examining? He's examining everything for Krishna. That's how he gets the name. That's how elevated he was. This being the case, how can he, seemingly being overwhelmed by his hunger and thirst, picked up a dead snake and wrapped it around the neck of a sage who is in meditation? We may think even we would behave better, differently. So when something like this extraordinary, uncommon is done by pure devotees, the other acharyas, they blame Krishna for it. So in this case, Parikshit Maharaj did something which is unusual. But Parikshit Maharaj humbly took a stance as if he has done. But actually it's Krishna who made him through, because as long as Parikshit Maharaj was around, Kali Yuga couldn't start. That's how powerful he was. With his devotion, he was keeping Kali Yuga at bay. But then this is material world, Kala Chakra should still keep going round. So then Krishna had to take Parikshit Maharaj back, but then through him, he gave this unparalleled gift to the entire humanity as a Srimad Bhagavatam. So Narada was liberated, and so was Parikshit Maharaj, but Krishna put him through that situation. Likewise, Krishna, he is actually telling Narada boy. Because if Narada boy wasn't pure, Krishna wouldn't have even appeared in his heart in the first place. So Narada boy was pure. Through him he is making Narada even more humble, because there is no limit. It's a good point. You brought it up. We tend to think, okay, humility or purity, 100%, is that fine? There's no 100% in spirituality. It's Anandam Buddhi Vardhana. So there is no limit to it. Narada, even at that point, didn't have any material taints. If somebody had material desire, the person wouldn't do what Narada boy did. Walking through all around the world, we'll see. Walking through different forests, towns, places. Going to the forest, taking a dip, sitting under a tree. Going for meditation. We have all watched a lot of movies. Somebody who is orphaned right at young age. How often have we come across a story like this? Normally in such a scenario, such a kid, what we have seen in movies is they would end up becoming a don by serving under another don. They go bad ways and do. Look at what Narada Muni has done. So Narada, there is no limit to one's humility. There is no one's limit to purity. It's Anandam Buddhi Vardhana. which is the Vedic scripture which can enhance my knowledge on devotional service? What are the various stages of devotional service mentioned in scriptures? For devotional service, you can read any book of Srila Prabhupada, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita, all small books, everything. But Prabhupada said one particular book as the incarnation of Srimati Radharani herself. That is Nectar of Devotion. And Prabhupada says anyone who wants to do devotional service, anyone who wants to understand the science of devotional service should read this book. You can look at the back cover of the book. So my recommendation here would be read Nectar of Devotion. How should we treat our spiritual masters who have fell from the position? Should we listen to them? Good question. This question was asked to my Guru Maharaj, he's known as Jayapatak Swami Maharaj. It was slightly different, but it's related. But I'll tell you what question was asked to him and his response. So one disciple asked my Guru Maharaj that there is one sannyasi who I took a lot of inspiration, who has written books. I'm reading that book, but I'm told I shouldn't be reading because the sannyasi is no longer a sannyasi. He has changed his ashram. He is a grahasthana. Should I read? Then my Guru Maharaj said, definitely you can read. If this thought is disturbing, oh, he is no longer a sannyasi, then don't worry.